Hello, and welcome back to Owens Bay. In this week's episode, we're heading back up the coast to build a cozy little harbor community. We'll be adding a small fishing harbor and breakwater, and continue our landscaping and detailing improvements along the shoreline. Our goal here is really just to capture that laid-back feel of the Pacific Northwest coast. And this is the first of a few builds along the coastline to flesh it out a little bit more. The area we're going to be working on today is coming into view right now. All this land below us. My name is Gyves, and let's get started. Okay, so for the next 2 or 3 episodes, we're going to just continue building up the coastline here. And for today's project, it's going to be a little fishing community, docks, harbor, that sort of stuff. First thing we're going to do is get rid of all the trees so we can actually see the landscape we're going to be working with. I'm going to be doing a few alterations to the landscape along the way here. This part of when I was creating the map, I didn't really heavily detail it. When I made the map, I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to be building. Now that we've really dialed in the Pacific Northwest coast, I need to enhance the shoreline and add some features that really bring out that sort of feel to the whole region. So we're going to be doing a bit of that during this episode. We're going to be expanding the rail line out past this harbor community. We're not going to be building a train stop here. We will be building a train stop in the community adjacent to it. I'm going to be doing the road layout in here. It's going to be for the fishing harbor and the community next door. I thought when I started this episode that I was going to somehow get all of this into one episode. Once again, biting off more than I can chew here. So you're going to see roads pop up that are not going to be part of this episode. I'm not going to focus on any of that. It's irrelevant to what I'm actually working on today. So you will see the road networks expand out throughout the whole area, but we're only going to be focusing on the fishing harbor for this episode. Now we had this little divot in the landscape here, and I thought it was another opportunity to add another lake. We could imagine this possibly being a water reservoir. If anything, it could be certainly utilized as such in the future if need be. Now, this particular cove is a bit of an odd shape, and I'm going to try to preserve the shape as much as possible. The town's going to have to conform to it a bit. It leads to some interesting building choices. Which is fun with trying to work within the landscape. You have to really think about the placement of your roads and how everything fits together and how the landscape actually influences the development of the town. Now, as I say this, later on in the episode, I'm going to do some fairly drastic changes to the landscape as well. Once again, I'm trying to build a particular location. The landscape as it is right now on the map doesn't really reflect it very well. So we're going to be doing that. One thing I'm going to be adding in here is a little creek. I've found out that a better way to try to draw in a creek after the fact is to start where the creek ends. So I'm starting at the shoreline and working my way back to the lake using this. I always forget what this particular landscaping tool is, at a very low setting so you're not distorting the landscape. This is really a lot easier. The way I would usually do this is start at the lake and work down to the coast, and it always is like you feel like you're literally working against the landscape. So starting at the coast and dragging the landscape back to the water source is a much better way to go here. There was a little bit of flooding, but it was not nearly as bad as what I usually encounter when trying to create these sorts of features. I want this to be a very small community, so the road layout is going to be pretty compact and small. I'm also going to try to enhance the features around the town to like bring everything in really close. So it really feels like the landscape is restricting how large the town can actually get to. Thought a little tiny little pond here along the highway would be nice. You see this quite often, just little bodies of water directly against the highways and stuff. Now I have this odd shaped flat plateau here. It didn't really seem to be suitable for what I wanted, so we're going to build it up into a little more of not exactly mountains, a little more rugged terrain, a little more hilly. And that essentially is our basic layout for the town. Now this area I'm drawing out right now, I was imagining this to be the kind of industrial area. There'd be a small industrial area attached to the town. I didn't really realize it when I drew it out, but it is, the wind direction is wrong. So far not a problem, but I have to be more aware of that. And we had a tragic accident here. Our geothermal plant burnt down because I don't have adequate fire coverage out here. So we have to rebuild this quickly. Okay, back to our town. And you can see here we have the full road layout of both communities. Be creating a little bit of a breakwater here, and what I'm going to be using here is Harbor Master J's lighthouse. Now I'm not going to use the same lighthouse again, but it's also available in parts, so with this I can make a much shorter, stubbier version, and this is what we're going to be using here. While I'm working on the town, I'm also doing some other work in the background. Here I'm adding a little like housing development across the highway from the university, as a little pedestrian crosswalk or overpass to get across. It's really quick and dirty. It's just a whole bunch of cookie cutter houses and there's not much to it. I have a homeless problem, so I'm trying to bump up some of the housing for that. Interesting enough, I'm not being able to fix my unemployment or my housing issues. What seems to be happening is every time I add more jobs, like more industry, more office jobs to the community, my unemployment rate goes up. When I add more housing, when I add more low-cost housing, that sort of stuff, my homeless numbers go up. It's almost like rather than serving the needs of the people who already exist in my community, building such things only seems to attract more people to the town, exasperating my issues. So I don't think these things are quite fixed yet. At least I haven't been able to figure out a way to deal with them in an effective way. Now I'm just going to be placing out a few buildings to get a feel of how the town's going to look here. This is going to be like an ongoing process as I flesh out how the town's going to look. For the mouth of this river, I wanted to try something a little different. I didn't really want this rocky ground texture here under the water, so we're going to replace it with a sand texture. You think of all the fine sand and silt being washed down the creek to the ocean here, so that's what I'm going for. some of these new surface textures to give it a bit more detail. I could have maybe been a bit more selective where I'm placing all these little pebbles and rocks. I put them everywhere. I could have dialed that back just a little bit. The small ones, not these large ones I'm putting down right now. And I'm going to layer up a whole bunch of surfaces here to like blend in the edge. So from sand to pebbles to larger rocks and gravel, and then finally boulders. And then we'll line it with trees. I'm going to add a bit of shading under the boulders here. This is something I haven't really tried before, and I think I have to play around with it a bit more. Just to enhance the look of it just a little bit, so it's not, to give it a bit more depth. And we're going to repeat the process on the other side of the creek. I keep switching between river and creek. It's really a creek. And like I said, now we're just going to line it with some trees. I think this is turning out really well. These new textures work really well for this sort of detailing. I'm also going to be adding some dead pine trees here. I'm just going to place 3 of them, not going to get too crazy here with them. And then we're going to knock them down on their side, trees that have been washed down the creek during spring flooding and that sort of stuff. But yeah, we can get some really nice detailing now with the surfaces for all sorts of different areas on the map, which is great. Here I'm experimenting with adding some stains to the bottom of the creek bed, just to give some more variation to the surface. This is also something I'm going to have to play around with a bit more. Yeah, I put this little industrial area in here. Was under the impression that the wind direction was correct. It turns out it's blowing right into town. So far, not an issue. I don't think it's going to be an issue. I don't think it's large enough to really create enough pollution. Also, it's fitting with the idea for this particular community. It's a working community. It's not like a tourist destination or anything like that. The tourists are driving by to head off to what's going to be in the next town. Now, here I'm trying to add more housing to fix my homeless issue. And like I said, I don't know really how the game mechanics are working for this, because I can't seem to, no matter what I try to do, I can't seem to resolve the homeless issue. So I'm not sure what's going on here. For the moment, I think I'm just going to assume that the mechanics are still buggy and not working correctly, and I will obviously try to fix these issues, but I'm working under the assumption that they're still not behaving correctly. For the history of this town, we're going to imagine that when it was first established, that it was like really a very narrow patch of ground where it was suitable for building, so everything's going to be packed in really tight. And then as property values increase, building pressure increases, it's going to be a very small place. It's not going to be very large. Attached to the industrial area, I put this craft brewery. I'm going to pretend that it's been here forever, and it's only been in the last couple decades where craft breweries become trendy, that it's revamped itself into this destination that you can actually go visit. Once again, my rather odd road layouts are forcing me to hand place a lot of buildings here just to get them the buildings I want and the layout I want, which is okay. I don't mind doing that, at least on a small scale. Along the creek side, we're going to have some larger properties. Property values here are rather cheap. And that's primarily because this particular creek probably would have a flooding incident every, say, 10 to 20 years or so. So not the best place to be building a home, but hey, you can build a larger home. Right here, there's some extra social housing for the university. And I'm trying to think of more creative ways to mix the industry in with the actual town rather than have it all in its own separate, almost gated community type of thing. Trying to spread it out a bit here. And we'll just shuffle some buildings around to get them positioned in interesting positions and line them up a bit. I'm also going to be, this is where the dock is going to go, the fishing dock, and there's also going to be a bit of industry over here as well. Work around the rather steep terrain here, so we're going to flatten it out and do some key walls so we can have some flat sections. And we're going to be continuing with this net lane here for the rail track bed. And for the edge detailing, I'm going to simplify it a little bit here, and we're just going to use this gravel texture surface. One thing we have to keep in mind for some areas on this map, what will happen as the weather systems come in off the ocean and hit the mountains, they will dump a ton of rain onto the area. So a little area like this up against the mountainsides, it's going to be very wet in here. So lots and lots of tree growth. Everything's going to be very dense as far as trees and stuff. A little overview here of the entire area. It's starting to fill in quite well. One thing you don't really get from the map too much is it's like I was saying in several episodes now, I am running out of flat area to build on. Not necessarily an issue, but it does start to limit the things we can actually build. So I have to be a bit more aware of that moving forward. When I was hand placing a lot of these homes, I consciously tried to remember to keep them, a lot of them level 1. Once again, for housing issues, just so not everything levels up to level 5. What year are we in? We're in like 2052. At this point, like most of the citizens in the region are extremely wealthy, and they level up practically all properties to level 5, and that does cause some issues for people on the lower end of the income spectrum. It's causing some issues, so I have to be consciously making sure I have some level 1 buildings around. Now, like I said earlier, we're going to be making some enhancements to the landscape, make it a little more dramatic. I want it to really read like the Pacific Northwest, and so that there's like a landscape that goes along with that, and that's what I'm trying to do here. So like these more dramatic cliffside areas, especially along the coastline or near the coastline. And I'm going to be forever playing whack-a-mole with these smokestacks. Another thing to keep in mind with this area is there's practically no topsoil. It is literally, you have a thin layer of like organic material, maybe a foot or maybe somewhere around a foot. It's not very much. And under that, it's usually just like rock. In this case, I actually thought I put down too many trees. One thing I like to do is keep like views. Think about the view from the driving along the highway. So here I wanted a little bit of a clearing, so as people were driving by, they could actually see the town. And this 4-lane road or highway here seemed a bit overkill, so we're going to downgrade it to 2 lanes. We can imagine this to be the old highway that used to run through this region before this highway up here was built. And I think it's coming together really nicely now. It's looking pretty good. And now I'm going to spend a fair amount of time like tying all the area together by putting down the surfaces and some of the detailing around it as well. town this size would not have this much industry or offices or any of this sort of stuff. Unfortunately, I need to place it just to satisfy the game mechanics. Hopefully I've done a good enough job to blend it in so it doesn't stand out so much. I don't have the space for large parking lots here, or it would take up most of the buildable area. So we're going to fit parking in wherever I can with the small custom parking lots. The idea with this small community is it's a place the locals know about, as it has probably a few really cool little businesses along the waterfront and stuff. The harbor, you might be able to buy fresh fish and stuff. But for tourists, they don't really know about it. Like I said, they're passing this place by to get to the next little town. Some of the buildings I picked out here for the town, they might be a bit on the large size. Like I think I have a couple of 6-story buildings. To be honest, I don't think those are quite appropriate. We still don't have even though we have a much better selection of buildings, for small scale, like for small scale towns, we're still lacking in selection for that. I'm reusing some of the ideas I had from the town of Owens Bay over here for the dock. This is going to be a little less detailed than Owens Bay. I'm going to use some of Harbor Master Jay's piers here to like frame in these roads to make them actually look like docks. The coastline in this area could be quite rocky, so we're going to also be detailing it to reflect that as well. And a few surface stains just to give it a bit of wear and tear. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it. In next week's episode, we will continue with our building projects along the coast and maybe try to sneak in a few unique features. I will see you all next week. Bye.